there are 4 main stats, and then there's the alternate stats. So to start this off, I'd like to talk about what stats are good, like what each stat does, why they are valuable, and then from there I'm going to get to Dexterity and Focus, and my issues with them, how to address it, that sort of stuff. So first, I kind of like the dynamic of Vitality and Armor. They're 2 different ways of doing defensive measures. Armor just prevents a certain amount of damage, but you have to have quenching runes and stuff to help it makes every healing more potent, but it also is hard to heal with. Vitality, on the other hand, gives you a ton of health, and with Soul Steal runes even gives you additional healing, Life Steal runes gives you a bunch of healing. So it's 2 different ways to be tanky with those stats. So whether you choose Vitality or Armor is kind of up to your decision sort of stuff. And as you can see, I chose Vitality over Armor. I know Kissa uses Armor, but it's just kind of interesting how that's a dynamic. Both are valid. In the same way, so Kissa actually chose Armor and Strength as their strongest stats, where I chose Vitality and Intelligence to show that both are viable. Both are viable stat combinations. So it's kind of interesting how whichever one you choose kind of changes how you strategize. So with the Armor, you're trying to just make sure you don't get hit too many times in a row, where with Vitality, you're just trying to make sure the total number of hits are low enough. Because with Armor, you'll eventually heal back. With Vitality, it's such an enormous amount, but it's hard to get rid of. So with Strength is just kind of the stable stat. If you choose Strength, everyone has a basic weapon attack that they can use to deal damage. Where Intelligence, it always is best, it's always dependent on your spell. There's a bunch of additional utility. Intelligence has, it also applies to meat. It also applies to a lot of talents. So Intelligence also has all these kind of quirky values. So what happens is with Strength, you just always, let's say you're going Sword and Board, you're just striking at everything. It's just, you always have a consistent attack pattern. With Intelligence, you have to find your attack pattern, but Intelligence also deals more damage. I will just state flat out, I'm pretty darn sure if it had just a DPS challenge against the dummy, Intelligence always wins out in the end. Unless you're like playing a Barbarian, in which case Strength can win out. So generally speaking, it's kind of like a balance of which kind of one you want to do, and there's 2 different styles of each of them. I think that's really cool and really well designed. And then we get to critical hits. So, Dexterity and Focus. It deals more damage, but it's hard to execute and relies on RNG sometimes, but it has the healing factor, so it has other effects, which is, I think that's a cool balance. I think they did a lot of work on it, but I think they have successfully balanced Strength and Intelligence. So, yeah. So then we get to Dexterity and Focus. You're going to notice by my stats that Dexterity and Focus are actually lower near Armor. A matter of fact, if we go over to the castle, I haven't bothered to increase Dexterity over here. I haven't bothered to increase Focus over here. Because they're just not worth it. They're just not worth it. Those stats are just not worth it. So, let's talk about what they do. So each of them increases your chance of getting a crit. As you can see, I am at 33 and 36 crit numbers respectively, and so our crit chance is 10% and 9%. And they just increase crit chance, which, okay, so we're going to just start with this. The fact that you had to note crit chance and crit chance, like under the stat that decides crit chance, shows that maybe this isn't the proper position. As a matter of fact, let's just talk about critical hits in general. Critical hits generally have this, is the idea of it's this chance, this opportunity of variance to become stronger than before. The problem is, in a lot of games, crit damage ends up in late game, compounding over everything else, and every build becomes a crit build of some sort. A perfect example is actually Rogue Legacy 1. In the early game, your crit chance is 0, but as you get further on in Rogue Legacy 1, you get these 2 buffs. One increases your crit chance by 2%, and can be upgraded 25 times to a maximum of every other attack is a critical hit. And then your crit damage, starting at like plus 100% or something like that, gets a buff that every buff gives it plus 5%, maximum of 25 times, to a point where it's scaled pretty exponentially. Add in that there's a bunch of equipment in the game that increases your crit chance, and you just have this destructive killer. You just have this destructive crit chance in the end game, in new game plus 3 and stuff, becomes how you do that. Now here's the problem. Dexterity and Focus, their crit damage, as you can see, it's only plus 30%. It's only plus 28%. It's not plus 100 and something. It's plus a small number. In fact, it starts at 25%. In addition, the crit chance kind of doesn't scale very high. As Kissa says, with max non-equipment dex, you get about 31% critical chance, which I believe someone did the math, and it looks like at the there's a specific algorithm that starts at basically every point of dexterity is plus 0.4% crit chance, which then slows down as you go. Just to put that into perspective, at 0.4% crit chance with every increase, let's just assume it was flat, which it's not. With 0.4% with an increase, and the only 25%, the 25% crit damage, the point at which dexterity starts scaling over strength is when your strength score reaches 1,000. Once strength score starts reaching 1,000, then increasing your strength by 1 is equivalent to increasing your dexterity by 1 in general, just raw damage. As you can see me at the 140 and stuff, I'm very close to done with this game. Not really a number that's significant. I think you get to like 200 and 250 if you've like focused on a stat. So when they become equal at 1,000, when dexterity and strength become equal at 1,000, that's one issue. The other issue is that we're treating it as equal. So I will state that dexterity and focus are, if we treat them as if we treat dexterity and focus as their own equivalent stats, they just don't add up. They don't add up at all. They're not anywhere equivalent. Now, they don't have to be equivalent. Dexterity just needs to be equal to focus, and that could be a crit theme. But then again, if we have dexterity and focus listed here, why do we then have to do crit chance and crit damage? Why does it do that? And yeah, so Lambodroid pulled up the stat. It's it's the stats minus 15 divided by the stat plus 235. So it's a general increasing slope with the limit equaling 1. The limit as x approaches infinity equaling 1. The math thing is that you never get to 100% crit chance, but you do get close as you get into like absurd, increasing, insane numbers. Anyways, so let's just talk a little bit about a stat that increases crit chance. Do you feel it? Do you feel, like you can feel as your strength goes up, you can see that stat bar get reduced. Do you feel your crit chance increasing? Not unless it's like a significant percent. Like Clotho's Spindle is an item that gives you plus 10% crit chance. Which, I should note that like at 90 dexterity, which is where my intelligence is right now, it's about 25% crit chance. So Clotho's Spindle is like almost, it's like 50 dexterity with a single talent. So, that's stuff like that. And also, you don't, like, even with the crit chance increasing, it doesn't, here's the big thing. Dexterity and Focus doesn't even increase crit damage. It just is crit opportunity. So if you don't increase damage in some other way, even if you get to 100% crit chance, if crit damage is just 25%, then it never is more than 25% of strength. Which always feels weird. So, like, what should they do with Dexterity and Focus? The simple solution is just get rid of them. Just crit chance and crit damage can be its own thing. It doesn't need to have a stat tied in. Or at the very least, if you tie it in, the stat should apply to both. To make the stat apply to both, it would make it feel a bit more impactful. Or just alternatively, if you're going to apply one to either crit chance or crit damage, the stat should apply to crit damage. It should apply... If Dexterity and Focus are going to be your crit focus builds, I think we should focus on crit fishing to, like, here's the thing. Dexterity and Focus, if we're treating them as an equivalent stat, which I'm just going to start calling it Dexterity, one of my recommendations is just to make a Dexterity stat that works for both. Separating crit magic crit chance and attack crit chance just feels a little weird to me. But if we're going to make a crit build, it should be a build that fishes for crits, not a build that, like, the main thing is, if you get to 100% crit chance, crit damage never increased as you were increasing these guys. Which is just... Why? Why? That seems like so counterproductive. Like, You get all this opportunity to do crits, and you have this focused crit build, and then your crits don't even do anything significant. They're just a little more damage. So strange. So I would suggest, first off, so let's just go into the suggestions. First off, Dexterity and Focus should be the same stat. They are not significant enough to be individual stats. If they are, then you stop treating them as equivalent stats. I think, yeah, basically, if they are so low that they are of the same, but they're below Strength, Intelligence, Armor, and Vitality, my question is, why are they named the same way Strength, Intelligence, Armor, and Vitality are named? I feel like their being named puts a higher level of significance on them, and you could deceive people with that. I think that could end badly. So we have to make them stronger in some way. So the first thing I would say is increase it by crit damage. The fact that you cannot get crit chance to 100% explains the issue with Dexterity as a stat. You need to have something that constantly scales. Strength constantly scales. Vitality constantly scales. All these stats constantly scale. They have a cap on armor so that they didn't break things, but then you have a quenching room to break that, to make sure it can keep going up. But crit chance, first of all, it needs to be crit damage, because if crit damage goes above 100%, okay. A matter of fact, gain to 100% crit damage is like the significant moment of, oh, when I get a crit, it really matters. So, first of all, I'd like it to go to crit damage. Personally, I would love it if it was actually a formula, like if the crit, like for the Knight's Sword, the base attack deals two times strength and damage. I would love if the crit was 2 times strength plus 4 times dex or something like that. Some sort of mathematics, so that dexterity could be its own stat in that way. It's not. I'm not sure how hard it would be to program that in, but if it's just based on the damage, the percentage of strength or intelligence, that's okay. Just make it scale pretty well. So then we get to crit chance. And this is where I would like it. I would like it to be a crit fishing build, because crit chance, I don't think should be a stat that gets increased naturally. I think what you should do with crit chance is 1, Clothos Spindle. There should be relics that you could search around to increase your crit chance. Maybe you could also have runes. Like maybe there's a crit rune that the Enchantress sells that increases your crit chance. But I don't think crit chance should be just like a natural increasing. I think it's crit damage you can increase drastically. Crit damage you can increase exponentially and not have an issue. Crit chance is the one that we have an issue with increasing exponentially. So I think crit chance should be like a flat 5% or something like that. Crit chance should just be a flat 5%, and then you could take relics. You could take all these abilities to increase your crit chance. And that way, if you have a dexterity-based character, it's about where intelligence is about like managing your resources, managing your mana pool, your spell you have to get the most power output, and strength is about just doing the consistent force. A crit fisher could still be the stronger class, but to become that stronger class, you need to get relics. You're reliant on getting relics to get consistent. You're relying on fishing for the damage to get the power. That way, they feel distinct, and it actually feels potent. It actually feels interesting. And then that way, like, you end up having this build where if you're the dexterity-focused character, you're the character that starts out weak and then looks around for relics to get stronger. Because once you get those relics, once you start getting consistent crits, you know, where a strength-based character might kill in 4 hits, the same character with dex, maybe it takes 9 hits to kill, but a single crit kills, because their dexterity is so high. It adds this interesting dynamic. And I want to see that dynamic. I would love to see dexterity just be its own, like, significant stat, the way strength, intelligence, and all that. Where crit chance, basically crit chance, you never feel when crits increase unless it's a significant buff, like you do with the relic, with Clothos Spindle. I would love that to be the only way you get the crit chance to increase. If we add crit chance to the castle, we have the problem that everyone wants to max those out. I don't think crit chance belongs to the castle. I think it belongs in relics. I think it might belong in runes. But crit chance needs to be this rare occasion that makes this massive explosion when it hits. It should feel like a critical hit. That's generally my plan. That's how I would change the dexterity. Now, if you don't choose that decision, that's okay. I just don't think, as it is, dexterity and focus justify being their own stats. As I said, they mix up with intelligence and strength, and people could mistake them to be on par in value, which they simply are not. I think just the fact that you have to put crit chance and crit damage down here shows that they might as well not be stats at all. That's just my opinion. But I do like the idea of just this crit fishing build that you can build. I do like that idea. And then maybe add more relics that focus on critical hits, so that it really allows you to build an actual relic hunter dexterity build. I think that would be the ending solution. Like, Glowing Ember actually is a good example, where every 5th hit is a 75% more damage. If it was like every 5th or 6th hit was a critical hit, and then it just costs more resolve, or they just add another relic that's like that. That'd be a cool solution. That would be a cool solution. I would love to see crit fishing be a significant and a reasonable build. But Dexterity and Focus are just not good stats right now. They're just not good stats right now. So it does need a change. It does need a change. Anyways, that's, I think, everything I want to say. I'm kind of rambling at this point, so yeah. There's a note. So the Zor's mod has something that made the crits a little better, because I've never been a fan of crit, but they had deterministic crits for the assassin. That is correct. They had deterministic crits. Right now, they're just an add-on, and they don't really do anything significant. The crit damage is not high enough to be notable, and the crit chance just cannot scale very well. So that's the issue as is. But hopefully, if they make those changes, that'd be really cool. You could even, like, as you were saying, the deterministic crits, maybe that for the assassin would be cool. But I think the other classes are fine as is. I would just like to see crits be, like Dexterity and Focus, be focused on crit damage instead of crit chance, so you can actually scale properly. If nothing else, if you take nothing else, crit damage should be the one that scales properly with a stat. Crit chance, that can't scale with a stat, because you cannot get above 1. You cannot get above 100%. Yeah, I think I've rambled on long enough. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening to my rambles.